The night is gentle, a silver moon hangs above quiet groves, and the stars glimmer like lanterns scattered in the sky. You find yourself entering a garden, ancient and timeless, where every leaf seems to breathe, and every blossom carries the weight of forgotten prayers. This is the garden of reflection. It is not a place of punishment as the world knows it. It is a place where the spirit is healed through care, through patience, through the simple touch of soil and water. Here, those who have wandered astray were not cast into fire or chains. They were invited to walk among flowers and trees, to learn the gentle rhythm of life once more. A soft path of sand leads you inward. The ground is cool beneath your bare feet, and the air is fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. Lanterns of clay rest upon the edges of the path, their flames low, swaying like whispers of old wisdom. There is no voice of judgment here, only the slow pulse of nature, steady and forgiving. In these groves, every tree is sacred. Each was planted by hands that once trembled with regret. Each flower grew from a moment of sorrow turned into patience. The soil itself remembers. It carries stories of broken vows, forgotten duties, and quiet tears. But it carries them gently, like a mother carrying her child. The sect who kept this garden believed the soul could be cleansed not through pain, but through service. To tend the earth was to tend the heart. To water a sapling was to water one's own spirit. Every fallen leaf gathered, every branch pruned was a step toward balance. Imagine the scene. A man once troubled by anger kneels to plant seeds of lavender. The fragrance seeps into his hands, cooling the fire within him. A woman burdened by pride bends to gather fallen petals, learning humility in each soft touch. Another, who had spoken words of harm, now whispers to the seedlings as they sprout, learning the healing tone of gentleness. The punishment here was never to destroy, it was to guide, it was to remind, it was to let life itself be the teacher. As you drift deeper into the garden, the sound of water comes softly. A small stream winds between mossy stones, its voice like a lullaby. The moonlight rests upon its surface, scattering silver ripples that dance across the night. Those who served their time in reflection often sat by this stream. They would place their hands in the water, watching the current carry away their mistakes, as if the river itself understood forgiveness. The stream was endless, always flowing, always moving onward. It whispered that nothing stays heavy forever. Even sorrow becomes light when carried by time and patience. At the center of the grove lies a great tree. Its trunk is wide, its roots deep, and its branches reach upward like arms lifting prayers to the sky. This was the heart of the garden. Those who had completed their time of tending would gather here. They would sit beneath the tree in silence, leaning against its bark, feeling its steady strength seep into their own hearts. Legends say this tree was born from the first seed planted in repentance, a seed laid in the ground by one who sought forgiveness, watered with tears, tended with care. From it grew this guardian of the grove, a reminder that even sorrow can bloom into something vast, something sheltering, something eternal. When the wind moves through its branches, the leaves rustle like soft voices, like a chorus of prayers whispered together. To sit beneath it was to be wrapped in peace. No guilt remained, no shadow lingered, only the quiet knowledge that one had learned, healed, and grown. Listen now to the way the garden moves. The air hums softly with night insects. An owl watches from a branch, silent, wise. The flowers open their pale faces to the moon, as if confessing their beauty to the night. Even the earth itself breathes. You can almost hear it, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of the world. The ancients believed that when a person cared for the garden cared in return. Hands that watered the roots became lighter, feet that walked the soft soil found rest, and hearts that once ached discovered a new rhythm. Patient, forgiving, whole. The punishment was never isolation. It was communion, a rejoining with earth, with breath, with time itself. Imagine yourself there, in the stillness of night. You kneel by a young sapling, its stem slender, its leaves trembling in the breeze. Your fingers pressed gently into the soil, cool and damp, grounding you. with a clay vessel. You pour water at its roots. The sapling drinks slowly, its leaves lifting toward the stars. You feel as though the tree thanks you, though no words are spoken. There is peace in this act, a quiet ritual. Your thoughts slow, your breath softens. The heaviness inside begins to dissolve, like morning mist fading with the rising sun. Some say the garden was not only a place of healing, but also a mirror, for every flower tended reflected the care within one's soul. Every seed planted revealed the hidden, hope still alive in the heart. Those who thought they were broken learn it otherwise. They discovered that, like soil, they could hold life again, and so the sect taught, to heal the garden is to heal oneself. This was their wisdom, whispered through generations, a punishment that punished no one, a path of soil, water, and moonlight, leading back to balance. Now, as the night deepens, the garden becomes still, the lanterns grow dim, their flames bowing low. The stars spread wider above, infinite and calm. The great tree sways gently, its shadow stretching like a blanket across the ground. The garden is not empty. It remembers every soul that passed through its gates, every hand that planted, every tear that fell, every sigh of peace that rose into the air. You feel their presence, soft and kind, lingering like fragrance in the night. The path leads outward once more. Yet the memory of the garden lingers within you. You carry it like a secret flame, gentle, steady and warm. Every breath you take feels slower, every thought softer, every shadow lighter. For you too have walked the garden of reflection. You have seen its lanterns, you have touched its soil, you have heard its streams, and now, even as you rest, the garden lives inside you. It's a place you may always return to in dreams. So let the night close softly. Let the stars keep their watch above you. Let the earth cradle you as it cradled every soul before. The garden remains eternal and patient, waiting for you in the quiet spaces of memory. Now drift onward as the lanterns fade, and the wind carries your spirit gently. The garden breathes, and so do you. Sleep comes like water flowing, like roots sinking deep, like moonlight falling across still leaves. Rest now. The garden watches. The desert waits under a pale sky. The air is still, and the horizon stretches without end, painted in silver dust and faint stars. The ground is covered in stones, smoothed by countless winds, silent and unmoving. This is where the ancient ones came, not for exile, not for suffering, but for silence. Here, punishment was not a whip nor a chain. It was a week among the stones, where words vanished and only the breath of the earth remained. The silence itself became the teacher, soft and patient, shaping the heart like the wind shapes the dunes. You step into this place in your mind, as though drifting across sand at twilight. The heat of the day has fallen away, leaving the desert cool, gentle, and wide. Shadows stretch long over the ground, and the stars above begin to reveal themselves, like quiet eyes watching from the heavens. The stones lie scattered everywhere. Some are as small as a palm. Others rise like giants, ancient pillars standing watch. Their silence is deep, not empty, but full. It is a silence that listens. It carries the weight of centuries, the patience of the earth. The desert sect believed that when a person lost balance, when anger or pride clouded the soul, they needed silence more than speech. They were sent here, into the company of stones, with no voice but the wind, and in that stillness, the heart slowly softened. Imagine the ritual. At dusk, the one who sought cleansing was led to a circle of stones. The circle was wide and simple, marked by rocks, touched by countless hands. The elders spoke no harsh words, only placed the seeker there with a vessel of water, a small mat, and the endless night sky. Then, silence began. No voices, no chants, only the desert, vast and eternal. The stones became companions. They did not judge. They did not move. They simply were. In their stillness, they taught the same. The first day was always heavy. The seeker would shift and sigh, restless with thoughts. Memories would echo, bold regrets rising like dust storms in the mind. But as hours passed, the silence did its work. Thoughts began to settle. The breath became slower. The eyes grew softer, resting on the horizon. By the second night, the desert felt less like punishment and more like a temple. The stones glowed faintly in moonlight. The air cooled to a gentle touch. The seeker felt as if the earth itself was holding them, steady and kind. The desert winds carried lessons too. They came softly, brushing across skin, stirring grains of sand. The wind would whisper through the stones, making music without words. To listen was to remember that life flows, that no pain lasts forever, that every sorrow passes with time. Sometimes, the seeker would press their hand against a stone, feeling its coolness. The stone had seen countless suns, countless nights. It had stood when kingdoms rose, when kingdoms fell. It was patient, unchanging. Its silence entered the heart, teaching endurance. On the third night, the stars grew brighter. The desert sky opened wide, filled with endless lights. The seeker, lying upon the sand, would gaze upward. Each star felt like a voice of comfort, ancient and calm. In the silence of the stones, the heavens themselves seemed to speak. The ancients believed that stars carried memory. Every shining point was a lesson, every constellation a story. When a soul lay quiet enough, the stars would reveal wisdom without words. The silence made space for such listening. The punishment became vision, and vision became peace. Day by day, the heart grew lighter. The stones never spoke, yet they answered. They answered with their stillness. They answered with their patience. They answered with the truth that one does not need to be loud to be strong, nor harsh to endure. By the sixth day, the seeker's restlessness was gone. They sat calmly among the stones, breathing with the rhythm of the desert, no longer resisting, no longer struggling. They had become part of the silence. They had learned its song. When the seventh dawn came, the elders returned. They approached without hurry, their robes trailing over sand. They found the seeker calm, their eyes softened, their spirit quiet. The silence had done its work. The punishment had turned into peace. Before leaving, the seeker would lift one stone and hold it close, not to carry away, but to feel one last time. Its weight reminded them of burdens once held. Its stillness reminded them of patience learned. The stone was then placed back among the others, to wait for the next soul in need of silence. The ritual ended not with speeches, but with a single breath. The seeker bowed their head, thanking the desert without words. Then they returned to the village, moving slower, walking lighter, carrying within them the stillness of the stones. From that day forward, silence became a friend. Whenever anger stirred or sorrow rose, they remembered the desert. They remembered the wide sky, the watching stars, the patient stones, and within, a deeper calm remained. The silence of the stones was more than a ritual. It was a mirror. It showed each soul its own weight, its own noise, its own shadow. And then it showed them the space beyond, the space of stillness, the space of peace. The ancients believed that silence was not emptiness. It was fullness. It was the breath of the divine, unspoken yet always present. To sit among the stones was to sit in the presence of that breath, and through it, to find balance again. Now the desert grows quiet once more in your mind. The stones lie still. The wind moves softly, carrying no burden. The stars above shimmer faintly. Keeping watch, you walk slowly from the circle, carrying silence inside you like a hidden flame. It will not leave you. It rests in your chest, steady and calm, ready to rise whenever needed. Let the memory of the desert remain. Let the silence of the stones live within your breath, and as you rest now, let their patience guide you into dreams. The night closes gently. The desert fades. Only the silence remains, deep and kind. Now drift onward. The stones watch quietly, and the stars return. The night opens with a hush. The stars rest above, scattered like soft sparks across velvet skies. A crescent moon hangs low, its pale light touching the rippling waters of an ancient river. The air is cool, the world quiet, and the sound of flowing water carries through the stillness like a song that has always been. This is the river of old Mesopotamia, river that has known the footsteps of countless generations, river that remembers the prayers of farmers, the songs of travelers, and the confessions of those who sought to be cleansed. Here, in ancient times, wrongdoers stood ankle-deep in the current. They did not meet fire. They did not meet chains. Instead, they met water. They let the river carry away their heaviness, washing the spirit until it felt light again. You stand upon the riverbank and you're dreaming. The soil is soft beneath your feet, cool with night dew. Reeds sway gently with the breeze, their tips bowing to the moon. The water glimmers silver as it moves, steady, patient, eternal. The Mesopotamian priests believed the river was alive. They spoke of it as a sacred being, a mother that held the power to cleanse. To step into its waters was to step into forgiveness. The river did not scold, the river did not wound. It simply received what was given and carried it away. Those who entered the water came. Quietly, at twilight, they removed their sandals, set down their burdens, and walked into the stream. The first touch was cool, like a soft breath against tired skin. The ankles felt its pull. The calves felt its sway, and soon the whole body seemed to belong to the rhythm of the flow. They stood in silence. No words were required. The river spoke for them. It carried unspoken sorrow, mistakes and shadows into the distance, beyond sight, beyond memory. Sometimes a priest would stand upon the bank, holding a lantern of flame, its glow reflected across the water, symbolizing the light that remained even when the heart felt heavy. But often, the ritual was done alone, just the soul and the current, just the silence and the stars. Picture the scene. A young man who had lied to his kin stands still in the water. He closes his eyes and feels the river tug gently at his feet. He breathes slowly, and with each breath his burden feels lighter. He watches the ripples move away from him, carrying his past into darkness. Nearby, an older woman stands in the flow. Her hands rest against her chest as the current presses against her legs. She has spoken harsh words in anger. Now she lets the river soothe her. The water swirls gently, and she feels as though her spirit has been bathed in moonlight. Every soul who entered the river left something behind, not in shame, but in release. The water asked for nothing in return. It simply carried, always onward, always away. The ancients said that the river was a bridge, not a bridge of stone, but a bridge of time. It linked the present with renewal, the burdened soul with freedom. To stand in its current was to feel that life, like water, moves ever forward. It does not cling. It does not keep. It flows. They believed that each drop was touched by the gods, that the current itself was a prayer. When one entered, the river listened. When one stepped out, the river remembered no wrong. All was washed. All was quiet. At times, offerings were made. Small clay vessels filled with seeds were set upon the surface of the water. The current carried them away, scattering them across unseen fields. It was a symbol of renewal, of life that continues, of growth after sorrow. The seeker would watch the vessel drift until it vanished into the night. In their heart, they knew their mistakes had vanished with it. Sometimes reeds were braided into little circles, placed upon the river like floating crowns. They turned slowly, spinning with the current, until they disappeared. The circles were reminders that life itself was a cycle. Mistakes would return as lessons, sorrows as wisdom, endings as new beginnings. The river was not only water, it was sound, it was movement, it was breath. Those who stood in it learned to listen. The rush of the current became like the sound of the spirit itself, steady, alive, never-ending. Many said that after leaving the river, even their dreams were gentler. They dreamed of flowing waters, of clear skies, of hands washed clean in moonlight. The sects who kept this ritual taught that peace was not found in resisting, but in allowing. Just as the river allowed every leaf, every grain of sand, every fallen feather to pass, so must the soul allow life to move. In this way, punishment became surrender, not surrender to defeat, but surrender to peace. You see yourself now, standing in that stream. The moon glimmers above. The water touches your ankles, your legs, your skin. It presses gently, reminding you that you are not heavy. The current tugs softly, reminding you that nothing stays still forever. You feel your breath match the river's rhythm. Slow, even, unbroken. Every drop is cool and kind. Every ripple is a whisper of release. Your body relaxes. Your mind softens. The past feels far away, already carried downstream, already dissolved into silence. The river does not hurry you. It asks nothing of you. It only flows, always steady, always forward. And in its flow, you find your own stillness. By dawn, the ritual ends. The seeker steps slowly out of the water, droplets shining upon their skin like pearls. They stand barefoot upon the riverbank, lighter than when they entered. The sun begins to rise, painting the sky with soft gold. The water continues to flow, unchanged, eternal, ready for the next soul who needs it. The seeker bows their head, not to stone, not to priest, but to the river itself. They whisper thanks, though the river needs no thanks. It has already carried away what needed to be carried. It has already returned them to balance. The river remains even now, in memory and dream. It flows not only through valleys of earth, but through the heart. Whenever one feels heavy, whenever one feels lost, the river can be remembered. Its gentle current can be heard in silence, its cool touch felt in breath. For the river was never only water, it was the symbol of release. It was the path to peace. And it still flows, within and beyond. The stars grow faint. The horizon glows softly with the promise of morning. But the river continues, endless, calm, alive. Let its memory stay with you. Let its flow guide your dreams. As you rest, the river carries all heaviness away. It carries you into stillness, into peace, into sleep. Now drift onward. The river flows gently, and the stars return. The night begins quietly. The air is cool, touched by the breath of unseen winds. Above, the stars linger like tiny flames, steady and patient in the wide sky. The moon hangs low, a silver guardian, watching gently over the earth. From the horizon, shadows stretch long across the fields until they meet the ancient steps of a hidden temple. This temple is not loud with gold or marble. It is simple stone, softened by centuries of wind and rain. Vines rest along its walls. The scent of cedar drifts faintly in the air. At dusk, a small flame is lit at its doorway, and so begins the ritual of the lanterns. Long ago, those who carried the weight of mistakes came to this place at nightfall. They did not come with shouts. They came in silence. Each was given a lantern, its flame born from the sacred fire of the temple. The lantern was not large, not heavy. It was a vessel of clay or bronze, with a small wick glowing inside. But to those who held it, the flame felt alive. It was said to be the reflection of their own spirit, their truth made visible in the night. The journey began at dusk. Step by step, each seeker would walk with their lantern through the long night hours, moving slowly, patiently, as the stars turned above. The light guided their path, but more than that, it guided their hearts. Every breath, every step, became part of the offering. Imagine the scene. The hills are quiet. The temple glows faintly in the distance. One by one, figures move along the pathways with lanterns in hand. Each flame flickers softly, never harsh, never hurried. Together, they look like a constellation that has left the heavens and come to walk the earth. The people walked until dawn, not fast, not seeking to arrive quickly, but slowly, as if each step were a prayer. Some walked in silence. Others whispered softly to the night, letting their words be carried away by the cool air. The lantern did not judge. The flame only burned, steady and warm. A reminder that truth, once lit, could never be lost. The flame was more than light. It was forgiveness. It was memory. It was hope. Those who carried it believed that as long as they held the lantern with care, they were carrying their spirit toward renewal. They were walking with truth in their hands. If the lantern flickered, they did not fear. If the flame bent in the wind, they walked calmly on. For even a small light, even the smallest spark, was enough to show the way forward. There is a story told of a farmer who had spoken falsehoods to his neighbors. His heart grew heavy, and so he came to the temple at dusk. He was given a lantern, its flame trembling in the first breeze. All night he walked, step by gentle step. At first his mind was restless. He thought of his mistake, of the shame it had brought. But as the hours passed, his thoughts began to quiet. The sound of his own feet upon the earth became a rhythm. The glow of the lantern became a comfort. By the time the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, his heart was lighter. He had carried his truth through the night, and with the sunrise, he felt forgiven. Another tale speaks of a widow who had grown bitter with grief. She too came to the temple, her hands trembling as she received her lantern. The night felt endless to her at first, the flame too small to ease her sorrow, but she walked. She walked beneath the stars, listening to the hush of the night wind, watching how the flame endured the darkness. In time, she saw that her grief too could endure without consuming her. By dawn, the lantern's light was joined by the sun, and she whispered to herself, "The flame has walked with me." She returned home with a softer spirit. For every seeker, the ritual was the same. Take the lantern, carry it through the night. Let it remind you of the truth within you, a truth that can be carried through shadow into light. The priest taught that the lantern was not the gift of the temple, but the mirror of the heart. The flame was already there, inside each soul. The ritual simply made it visible. To walk with the lantern was to walk with one's own spirit, tenderly and faithfully, until the dawn. The air of those nights was filled with quiet music, not from instruments, but from the simple sounds of life, the whisper of reeds swaying, the soft crunch of footsteps on earth, the rustle of nightbirds in the distance. Every sound was gentle, woven together with the glow of the flames. The lantern swayed slightly with each step, creating circles of light that drifted across the ground. It was said that if you looked from the hills, you could see the procession as a river of stars, flowing across the land until morning. As the journey neared its end, the horizon began to pale. The eastern sky softened, blue returning where black had been. Each seeker would walk until the first rays of the sun touched their lantern. When night met morning, the ritual was complete. At that moment, many bowed their heads. Some closed their eyes. Some held the lantern close, as if embracing the flame. They did not extinguish it, for the sun itself became the greater light. The flame of the lantern melted into the brilliance of day, its purpose fulfilled. Those who had walked returned their vessels to the temple. The clay and bronze were cleaned and kept, ready for another dusk. But the true light, the one carried within, returned home with them, invisible, steady, eternal. The lesson of the lantern was simple. Truth is not always loud. It is not always grand. Sometimes it is a single small flame, trembling yet never fading. To carry it faithfully, even in darkness, is to be forgiven. To walk with it patiently through the long night is to find peace. The ancients believed that as long as a person carried truth within them, they could never be lost, even when the world grew dark, even when shadows stretched long. The light within was enough. Now imagine yourself in that sacred night, the temple behind you, the stars above you, the lantern in your hand. Its glow touches your skin with warmth. It flickers gently, yet it remains. You walk slowly, calmly, letting the rhythm of your steps match the rhythm of your breath. The night air is cool upon your face. The silence holds you like a blanket. The flame steadies you. It reminds you that you, too, carry light. You, too, are walking with truth in your hands. The hours pass, but they do not trouble you. Each moment is soft. Each step is simple. Your heart grows lighter with the flame's gentle company. And then, as you look toward the horizon, the first hint of morning appears. The sky glows faintly. The stars slowly fade, one by one. As the sun rises to greet the world, the lantern's flame joins the dawn. You bow your head, and you rest. The temple remains in silence. The vessels are set aside, but the memory of the lantern continues, moving like a quiet song through the centuries. It whispers still. Carry your truth even when the night is long, and you will walk into light. The world is quiet now. The stars are hidden. The night has passed, but the lantern's glow is still with you, within you, as soft as breath, as steady as the heart. Let us drift onward. The flame remains. Now rest as the stars return. The desert rests beneath a sky of endless stars. The sands stretch outward like a sea without water, their surface glowing faintly beneath the pale moon. The air is still, yet sometimes the wind carries whispers, soft and fleeting, like voices long forgotten. Amid this vast silence, a small fire glows in the distance. Its light trembles against the night, surrounded by figures seated in quiet circles. Here, among the desert wanderers, there was a practice both humble and sacred. It was the ritual of the cloak of ashes. Not a cloak woven by hand, not a garment stitched with thread, but one formed from the earth itself. Ashes gathered from the fire, cooled and gentle, spread upon the shoulders like a robe. It was worn not for punishment, but for remembrance, a reminder of the fragility of life and of the truth that all things, even the brightest flame, return one day to dust. The fire in the desert was sacred. It burned not only for warmth or cooking, but as a teacher. Each night, when the flames danced high, the wanderers would gather to sit beside it. They watched the sparks rise into the dark sky, joining the stars above. They watched the wood turn slowly to embers, then to ash, and when the fire had softened into gray dust, it was gathered carefully, as if handling something holy. The ashes were placed in clay bowls. From them, a handful would be lifted and spread upon the shoulders of the seeker. The cloak of ashes was light, and yet it carried meaning heavier than stone. It whispered of impermanence, of humility, of the gentle truth that nothing in this world was fixed forever. Those who wore the cloak did so in silence. They did not speak as the ashes touched their skin. They only bowed their heads and felt the cool dust settle upon them. The grains clung softly to fabric, to hair, to hands, and in that moment the person remembered, "I am dust, and to dust I will return." But they also remembered another truth. From dust, life begins again. The cloak was never meant to shame, it was meant to heal. For the wanderers believed that when one humbled themselves before the desert, before the fire, before the truth of life's fragility, then renewal would come. The ashes were not an ending, but a threshold. The winds would rise sooner or later, carrying them away, and with their passing, the soul would be cleansed. There is a story told of a young shepherd. The words burned in his heart long after they had been said. One night, he came to the circle by the fire. He knelt as the ashes were lifted and poured gently across his shoulders. At first he felt small, as if the dust pressed down upon him. But as the night deepened, he realized the cloak was not heavy. It was light, almost tender, as though the desert itself had placed its hand upon him. When the morning winds came, the ashes drifted away like smoke, and his spirit felt lifted, freed from its weight. Another tale speaks of an elder woman who had grown proud of her wisdom. She felt higher than others, taller than the dunes, firmer than the mountains, but pride made her restless, and peace slipped away from her heart. She too was brought to the fire. She too bowed her head as the ashes were spread upon her robe. For a long time she sat in silence, hearing only the crackle of dying embers and the soft movements of the desert night. When the wind finally swept the dust from her shoulders, she smiled softly. She remembered that even mountains crumble, and even sand was once stone. Her pride softened, and in its place came gentleness. The cloak of ashes was a teacher for all. Children wore it when they quarreled. Hunters wore it when they wasted what they had taken. Mothers wore it when grief pressed heavily upon their hearts. Fathers wore it when anger clouded their vision. Each found that the ashes reminded them of balance, of patience, of the smallness and greatness of life all at once. Imagine the desert night, the fire fading into embers, the bowl of ashes carried from hand to hand. One figure bows, and the cool gray dust is placed across their shoulders. The cloak settles quietly, and the person sits still, breathing slowly beneath the stars. They do not speak, they only breathe. They feel the earth upon them, light yet steady, and their heart grows quiet. Above, the constellations seem to lean closer. The stars are mirrors of ash, glowing in the black sky. Both flame and dust are written there, reminding all who look that life is both bright and brief. And yet, even the briefest flame leaves warmth behind. Even the softest ash nourishes the earth for new growth. The desert winds always came. They moved gently across the dunes, whispering through dry grasses, circling the fire. When the time was right, they lifted the ashes from the shoulders of the seeker. The dust rose, swirled, and vanished into the night sky. It was said that the wind carried the burden away, scattering it into the wide silence where it dissolved like smoke. The seeker, watching the cloak drift into the air, felt the weight within them also dissolved, that the desert had taken what they carried. The desert had returned them to stillness. Those who walked away from the fire after wearing the cloak often did so with slower steps. Their pace was calm, their hearts softened. The ashes left no stain upon their robes, for the winds had washed them clean. They returned to their tents, to their families, to their lives, with gentler hands and quieter spirits. The cloak had reminded them, all things pass. Harsh words pass. Grief passes. Pride passes. Even anger and sorrow are carried away, if one is patient enough to let the winds rise. The ritual of the cloak was not only for those who erred, it was also for those who wished simply to remember. Sometimes, even without mistakes, one must pause and recall the truth of fragility. To feel the ashes on one's skin was to feel the closeness of the earth. It was to bow humbly before the mystery of life and death. It was to accept the gift of beginning again. And so, night after night, the fires burned. Ashes were gathered. The cloak was placed. The winds came, carrying the dust into the desert sky. Each ritual was simple. Each ritual was the same, yet each was different, for each heart was changed in its own way. The wanderers believed that those ashes were not lost. They rose into the air, joining the dust of the earth, the clouds of the heavens, the breath of creation itself. To wear the cloak was to be joined to all things, the fire, the sand, the wind, the stars. It was to know that one's life, fragile as dust, was also infinite, for it was part of the great whole. Now imagine yourself seated by that ancient fire. The flames glow softly, turning slowly to embers. A bowl of ashes is lifted toward you. With bowed head, you feel the dust upon your shoulders. Cool and light, you sit quietly, you breathe gently, you feel the truth of fragility resting upon you, and yet you are not afraid. The cloak does not shame you. It comforts you. It reminds you that burdens do not last forever. In time, the wind begins to stir. It brushes across your face, soft as a whisper. It lifts the ashes from your cloak. You watch as they rise, swirl, and fade into the night sky. Your spirit feels light. Your heart feels calm. You are as the wanderers were, humbled, renewed, at peace. The fire fades. The desert rests. The stars return to their eternal watch, and you rest, too, wrapped in the memory of the cloak, in the whisper of the wind, in the softness of the night. Let us drift onward now. The cloak has lifted. The wind has carried it away. Now rest. As the stars return, the mountains rose like ancient guardians, their shapes softened by the veil of dusk. Snow rested upon their peaks like pale crowns, while their bases disappeared into forests of pine and cedar. The air was still and hushed, as if the earth itself leaned close, waiting for stories to be told. It was in these mountains that a circle would gather, a circle not of stone or fire, but of quiet voices and patient hearts. Far from the noise of the valleys, high upon paths known only to shepherds and seekers, there was a village where people lived by listening. They taught their children that ears were not only for sound, but also for wisdom, for the echo of truth carried more gently than the clash of command. And so, when one among them strayed from harmony, when a heart wandered into harm or a hand into wrong, the punishment was not exile, nor whip, nor chain. It was listening. The wrongdoer was asked to sit at the center of a wide circle. Around them, the villagers formed a ring, sitting cross-legged upon mats of woven reeds, their faces softened by lantern glow. There was no anger in their eyes, no harshness in their voices. They spoke softly as though each word was a thread of silk, floating into the night. One would speak of the stars. Their shining paths across the sky were like rivers of light, too patient to be hurried, too eternal to be broken. They told how each star carried a story, and how to ignore the stories of the heavens was to lose one's way in the dark. Another would speak of rivers. Rivers, they said, never chose to wound the stone, and yet by flowing they wore valleys deep and wide. Gentleness carried more strength than striking force. Water taught patience, and patience healed. Another spoke of the gods, not in fear, but in reverence. The gods were not to be bought with gifts or tamed by words, but met through stillness, through silence, through listening. To ignore the divine voice was to be deaf to the song that binds earth to sky. The wrongdoer sat, at first restless. Some fidgeted, some sighed. But slowly, the rhythm of the voices worked like waves upon a shore. The heart that once raged with excuses grew quieter. The body, once tense, settled like dust after wind. The ears, unused to patience, began to open. It was said that the mountain itself joined in the circle. For when the people spoke, their voices would echo back, softened by stone, stretched by distance. It was as though the cliffs repeated the teachings, not to correct, but to cradle them longer in the air. The wind carried the words down into the valleys, so that the streams and trees also heard. No one hurried the circle. It lasted as long as it needed to last, sometimes one night, sometimes many. The only measure was the stillness of the heart in the center, when the wrongdoer no longer resisted, when their breathing matched the breathing of the group, when their gaze lifted not in shame, but in clarity. The circle was complete. Then silence fell, a silence deep and kind, as if the entire mountain breathed with them. That silence was the final teacher. In it, the wrongdoer heard not only the voices of others, but the echo of their own spirit. What was carried away was not guilt, but awakening. The people believed that listening was a form of weaving. Each voice was a thread, each silence a knot. Together they wove garments of memory, cloaks of wisdom, in which the wrongdoer could wrap themselves as they walked back into life. The circle left no scars, only paths to follow. In the mornings after such nights, mist would hang low upon the ground, curling around stones and doorways like incense. The wrongdoer would rise early, walk to the edge of the village and sit quietly with the streams or the trees. They no longer rushed. They no longer spoke without thought. They had learned that listening was itself a prayer. Some said that the gods smiled upon this practice, for punishment that heals is more sacred than punishment that wounds. The gods, too, wished to be listened to by in thunder, in rain, in the hush of snow upon branches. And so those who had sat in the circle carried within them a new ear, one attuned not only to people, but to the world itself. Stories tell of a young herdsman who once took what was not his. He was brought to the circle. At first, his head hung low and his hands clenched tight, but the circle did not scold him. They spoke of stars, of rivers, of gods. They spoke of sheep who know the voice of their keeper, and of fields that grow well when tended with care. By dawn, the boy's eyes lifted. When he returned to the hills, he became the gentlest of keepers, and the sheep followed him as though they had always known him. There was also a woman who spoke cruel words, tearing the peace of her family. She, too, was brought to the circle, and the voices around her spoke of soft winds, of the warmth of hearth fires, of the way words could heal as well as harm. By the end of the night, her anger had melted like frost beneath the sun. Her voice, once sharp, became as soothing as a lullaby, and children sought her presence in times of fear. So the circle endured, generation after generation. It became more than punishment. It became a ritual of remembering. Even those who had done no wrong would sometimes sit in the center, asking only to listen. For in listening, they found peace. In listening, they remembered who they were. As dusk deepened into night, the circle's lanterns glowed like stars fallen to earth. The people's voices rose and fell, gentle as a tide. Sometimes they spoke of ancient gods, sometimes of rivers, sometimes of the moon that leaned close, as though it too wished to be part of the gathering. All was woven together, word by word, silence by silence, and when the circle ended, the wrongdoer did not leave as they came. They left softened, stilled, opened. They carried the circle within them, like a quiet flame that did not burn but gave light. Now, as you lie here drifting in the calm of your own night, you too are within such a circle. Around you are the voices of stars, of rivers, of winds through branches. They do not scold, they do not hurry. They only speak gently until your own heart slows and opens. The mountain is still here. The voices are still here. And you, in this resting hour, are safe within the circle. Let the words fade into silence. Let silence become the last teaching. Now rest as the stars return. Now drift as rivers carry you onward. Now close your eyes as the gods lean near, whispering not commands, but blessings. The circle holds you. The night cradles you, and all is well. The night was fading. Shadows stretched long, then thinned as the first threads of light touched the edges of the horizon. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the sun. The grass was heavy with dew, each blade carrying a drop of silver, like 1,000 tiny mirrors of the sky. Birds stirred softly among the trees, their voices still hushed, as if they too were waking from dreams. In the quiet valley beneath the mountains, there was a path of meadow that stretched toward the rising sun. It was not marked by stones, nor bound by walls. It was made only of earth and grass, kissed each night by cool mist, and each morning by soft light. The people of the valley called it the Walk of Dawn. For here, those who sought renewal came barefoot at daybreak, carrying nothing but their breath. It was said that to walk upon dew was to let the earth cool the fire of sorrow. Each drop of water upon the feet was a blessing, each step a prayer. The penitent did not walk quickly. There was no need. The journey was not about reaching a place, but about letting the soul arrive at peace. At the edge of the meadow, a man once stood in silence, his head lowered. He had wandered in worry, carrying heaviness that words could not ease. The elders had told him, "Rise with the sun. Step upon the morning grass. Let the earth teach you what your heart has forgotten." And so he came. His sandals were removed, his feet pressed into the cool blades. The dew clung to his skin, soft and cleansing, and he breathed as though each breath was his first. The first step was always the hardest. The ground was cold, and the body resisted, but with each slow movement, the heart learned to surrender. The dew was not punishment, but comfort. It wrapped the feet as a mother wraps her child, easing the weight carried through many nights. The villagers believed that as the sun rose, the grass became a bridge between the heavens and the earth. The drops of dew were tiny vessels, carrying fragments of the sky to the soil. To walk upon them was to join heaven and earth within oneself, for the body was earth and the spirit was sky. Each step was a prayer without words, a prayer of release, a prayer of return. Those who walked with sorrow felt their grief softened. Those who walked with anger felt it dissolve like mist in sunlight. Those who walked with doubt found clarity, waiting like a bird upon a branch. The meadow stretched wide, open to the dawn. Some who walked closed their eyes, trusting their feet to guide them. Some lifted their faces to the light, letting the warmth of the sun fall upon their skin. Others moved as though in dream, each breath slow, each step sacred. It was said that the gods of the valley once placed blessings in the morning dew, not gifts of wealth or strength, but gifts of stillness. To receive them, one did not bow, nor chant, nor burn offerings. One simply walked, open-hearted, across the living earth. The elders told stories of a woman who carried grief for many years. Her child had returned to the stars, and no words of comfort had soothed her. Each dawn she sat by her hearth, unwilling to rise. But one morning, as the mist clung low and pale light reached her door, she heard a voice within her spirit, "Walk." So she stepped outside, barefoot, into the meadow. The dew kissed her feet, cool and tender. She wept as she walked, yet with each step her tears grew lighter, as though the earth was drinking them. Sharing in her sorrow, by the time the sun was high, she no longer wept. Her heart was not empty, but at peace, held in quiet balance with the sky. Others told of a youth who had spoken harshly, breaking the trust of his kin. He was sent to the walk of dawn, not as punishment, but as renewal. At first he strode quickly, eager to escape his shame, but the elders called him back. Slow, they whispered. Let the earth carry you. He returned to the beginning, lowered his eyes, and began again. This time each step was measured, each breath deliberate, and in that slowness, he felt the earth forgive him. When he returned to his people, his words were soft, and his heart was true. The walk of dawn was not only for the sorrowful. Even those at peace would rise early to walk. They said it was a way to greet the day with reverence, to let the first light enter not only the eyes, but the soul. Children walked with laughter, splashing dew with their tiny steps. Elders walked with patience, leaning upon staffs, their faces turned toward the light. All were welcome. For the earth did not choose who to bless. The path was always silent. Not because silence was commanded, but because words seemed too heavy for the hour. The air itself asked for quiet. The birds sang gently, the streams whispered faintly, and the grass spoke through touch alone. In that silence, walkers heard not only the earth, but themselves. They heard their own breath, steady and alive. They heard their own heart, beating not in fear, but in rhythm with the world. Those who finished the walk often lingered, sitting at the meadow's edge as the sun rose higher. They watched the dew vanish in light, like blessings released back to the sky. It was said that as each drop disappeared, a burden lifted from the soul. The body grew lighter. The spirit grew brighter, and the day ahead felt like a gift, not a weight. As seasons turned, the meadow changed, yet the walk remained the same. In spring, the grass was fresh and wildflowers nodded along the path. In summer, the dew was warm, sparkling in golden light. In autumn, leaves drifted down to join the steps, rustling like quiet prayers. In winter, the dew was frost, crisp and sharp, yet still walked by those who longed for renewal. Even in snow, the people came. They said that beneath the frost, the earth still waited with open arms, still ready to cradle the weary. For the walk of dawn was not bound by season, but by the eternal promise of new beginnings. Now, as the chapter of night closes and the chapter of morning waits, you too may feel the cool touch of the earth. Perhaps in dream, you walk barefoot across grass wet with silver light. Perhaps you hear the hush of the world, soft as a prayer. Each step carries you farther from weight, closer to ease. Each breath becomes a blessing, filling you gently, emptying you kindly. Let the meadow stretch before you. Let the dew cool your spirit. Let the dawn rise within your heart, steady and golden. For the walk is not hurried, and the path is not far. It is only the distance between burden and peace, between night and day. Now drift onward as the sun lifts softly. Now rest, as the grass bends beneath your gentle steps. Now dream, as the dew glimmers like stars fallen to earth. The walk of dawn is beneath you. The sky is above you, and all is well. Night lingers gently on the edge of dawn. The stars are fading, yet they hold their glow, scattered like forgotten dreams upon the heavens. The air is cool, soft as a veil. In the valley of ancient stones, there is a pond so still that it mirrors the sky without flaw. No ripple disturbs its glass. No wind bends its face. It rests calm and eternal, waiting for those who come to speak their truth. The elders called it the mirror of still water, not for its beauty alone, though beauty was there in abundance, but because within its surface, souls could see themselves more clearly than in polished bronze or silver. It was not the eyes that saw, but the heart. And so the people came, not to boast, not to plead, but to listen to their own spirit, reflected upon the gentle water. At twilight, when the world was hushed and shadows lay long, a traveler would kneel by the shore, bare feet pressed into the earth, hands rested upon knees, eyes lowered to the pond. The rite was simple. Speak, slowly, until the water was still. The words might be sorrow. They might be confession. They might be longing. Joy or silence turned into sound, yet always. The water answered, not in speech, but in stillness. The people believed that ripples were the sign of unrest. If the soul was troubled, the water would tremble. If the heart was restless, the surface would stir. But when truth was spoken, when words carried no mask, no weight of disguise, then the pond grew calm, as though it had heard and accepted. That was the moment of peace, the moment when the spirit became whole again. It was told of a man who had wandered far into bitterness. He had spoken lies to protect himself, and in doing so, had lost the trust of his kin. The elders guided him to the pond at night. They said no punishment awaited him there, only a mirror. He gazed into the water and began to speak. At first, his voice was sharp. The pond quivered, rippling outward in circles. He stopped, afraid, but the elders urged him gently, "Continue, let the water teach you." So he spoke again, this time more slowly. Truth emerged between his breaths. He spoke of his fear of losing those he loved, of the weakness he had hidden, of the loneliness he had carried. The ripples began to fade. With each confession, the surface smoothed. By the time his words grew quiet, the pond was calm as a polished stone. The reflection of the stars returned, clear and endless. He wept, yet his tears were not bitter. They fell into the water, vanishing without sound, as if the pond had received them tenderly. When he rose to leave, his heart was light, like dawn breaking after storm. There was also a story of a young woman who carried shame like a heavy cloak. She had done no harm, yet in her silence she had hidden her true self. Afraid to speak her heart, she lived in shadow, never fully seen. The elders brought her to the mirror of still water. They told her, "Here, you need not speak to others. Speak only to yourself. Speak only to the water." She knelt, trembling. At first she whispered half words, unsure. Her voice caught in her throat. The pond stirred with the faintest ripple. But as she continued, her voice grew steady. She spoke of her dreams, her longings, her hidden strength. And when the last words left her lips, the water was utterly still, reflecting her face as though carved in moonlight. For the first time, she saw herself without fear, without disguise, and she understood she was whole. Children, too, were brought to the pond, not as penance, but as teaching. They would gather in silence, kneeling along the shore, their wide eyes filled with wonder at the mirrored sky. The elders told them, "The water listens. It holds no anger. Speak truth, and you will always see yourself." Some spoke of small quarrels, some of dreams of flight or play. Their voices rippled the pond, but only for a moment. Soon the water calmed, teaching them that honesty, even in play, brings peace. The pond was always approached with reverence. No stone was ever thrown, no stick disturbed its quiet. It was not a place for noise or jest. It was a place where silence was alive, where the world's reflection taught the soul to rest. The air above it carried a fragrance of moss and night-blooming flowers. Frogs sometimes sang in the reeds, their voices low and soft. Adding to the stillness rather than breaking it, owls drifted overhead, their wings silent, their eyes bright upon the dark. Every detail of the place seemed designed to remind the heart of balance, of gentleness, of truth. The mirror of still water was also used when great decisions weighed upon the people. A leader uncertain of choice would kneel there at night, speaking doubts to the pond, not seeking answers, but seeking clarity. And when the water stilled, they knew their heart was aligned. The choice would rise not from the ripples of fear, but from the stillness of truth. Many said the pond itself was born from the tears of a goddess. Long ago, she had watched her people suffer and weep, and her own sorrow overflowed. Her tears fell upon the valley, filling it with water pure and clear. But unlike ordinary water, hers was sacred. It did not simply reflect faces, but the unseen spirit beneath. Thus, the pond became eternal, never drying, never fading, always present for those who sought peace. Seasons touched the pond, yet its stillness endured. In spring, blossoms drifted down upon its surface, soft petals floating like small boats. In summer, dragonflies hovered above, their wings glimmering like shards of light. In autumn, leaves fell and spun, yet always the water settled, always the mirror returned. In winter, frost gathered at its edges, and thin ice shimmered like glass. But beneath, the heart of the pond remained the same, waiting in silence. Now, as the listener drifts, imagine yourself at the water's edge. The air is cool against your skin. The pond lies before you, unbroken like a sheet of polished night. You kneel. Your reflection looks back, calm, steady, waiting. You breathe, and with each breath, the water grows smoother. You whisper truths, not to another but to yourself. And with each whisper, the ripples fade, until at last the pond is utterly still, and your heart is as clear as the stars above. Let this image cradle you. Let the silence of the water settle upon your spirit. Let the reflection remind you that you are whole, and nothing is hidden. For peace is not found in noise, nor in the rush of day. It is found in the calm surface of still water, waiting patiently, always near. Now drift onward, gentle one. Now rest as the stars return upon the pond. Now sleep as truth settles quietly, like a mirror without ripple. The mirror of still water holds you. The night surrounds you, and all is, well, the night air rests like a gentle hand upon the valley. A pale moon drifts through veils of cloud. The stars shine faintly, scattered as seeds across the dark sky. Between quiet hills, a village lies asleep, its small houses glowing with the dim light of embers. Beyond the edge of the dwellings, hidden in folds of the earth, rests a sacred hollow. There, a circle of stones surrounds an open space where voices once rose into the air like smoke. This was called the Valley of Return, a place where mistakes were not met with anger, but with song. The people who lived in this valley believed that every soul, no matter how lost, still carried a note of music within. Sometimes that note grew quiet, hidden beneath layers of sorrow or misstep. Sometimes it was drowned out by noise or twisted by fear, but the note was never destroyed. To bring it back, to awaken it again, one only needed to let the voice rise, steady and true. When someone faltered in the ways of kindness, when harm was done or truth was broken, they were not cast away. Instead, they were invited into the hollow. There, beneath the open sky, the people gathered. Torches glowed faintly, their flames bending gently in the wind. The air carried the scent of pine and the faint murmur of distant water. Those who came to the circle would sit quietly, breathing, listening. They knew no anger awaited them here, only the song of returning. The elders would begin softly, a single hum, low and deep, rising like the earth's own heartbeat. Others joined, one by one, weaving layers of sound. Their voices did not accuse. They did not point to fault. They carried no harshness. They only created a path of harmony, a place where the one who had stumbled could find their note again. In time, the person at the center would be asked to sing, not in perfection, not in strength, but in honesty. A trembling whisper, a broken tone, even silence shaped into sound. All were welcome. It was believed that the truth of a soul could be carried best in song, for music holds what words cannot. When the voice finally rose, it joined the others, weaving into the river of harmony. At first uneven, at first unsure, but slowly, gently, it found its place. There is a story of a young shepherd who lost the flock entrusted to him. In his fear, he hid the truth, and for days he wandered alone, weighed down with shame. When his secret was revealed, he was brought to the valley. The circle formed around him, voices humming like the earth itself. At first, he could not sing. His throat closed, his chest ached, his eyes filled with tears. But the voices did not stop. They circled him with gentleness like water around a stone. And finally, a sound broke free, a cracked note, fragile, uncertain, yet the circle received it, lifted it, and wove it into harmony. Soon his voice grew stronger, rising with theirs, until he could feel the burden dissolving. When the song ended, silence returned, and in that silence he felt whole once more, as though he had come home. Another tale tells of an elder woman who had spoken harsh words in anger. Her spirit was troubled by regret. She walked herself into the hollow unbidden. There she asked to sing. The circle gathered, their voices rising around her. She closed her eyes and sang a melody of sorrow. Her voice trembled like a reed in the wind. Yet as the others joined, her sorrow turned to beauty. Her mistakes softened into notes that lifted like dawn. And by the end, she was weeping, but her tears fell as rain upon fertile earth. Her heart was light. Her spirit returned. In this valley, music was more than sound. It was healing. It was forgiveness. It was the reminder that even the broken can shine when touched by harmony. Voices together carried what one voice alone could not. Each note was a thread, and together they wove a cloth of peace. Children learned this from the time they could walk. They were taught that song was not only for celebration, but for mending. If a quarrel rose between them, they were guided to sit and hum until the anger softened. The hum was steady, like a breath drawn and released. Soon laughter returned and play resumed, as if the quarrel had never been. They learned that sound could heal, that music could hold sorrow until it was ready to be set free. The valley itself seemed to listen. The stones carried echoes long after the voices had faded. When the wind swept through, it carried the memory of those songs across the hills. Birds often came to rest upon the stones, their wings folding as they listened. It was said that even the animals felt the peace of the hollow, for they too lived in harmony with the earth's song. Long ago, it was believed that the valley was shaped by a divine hand. A goddess of music, sorrowed by the harsh punishments of the world, created a place where mistakes could be transformed into beauty. She pressed her hand into the earth, and the hollow was formed. She placed stones in a circle, like the rim of a great drum. Then she breathed her voice into the winds, so that the valley would forever carry the memory of her song. From that time onward, the people chose music over judgment, song over silence, beauty over shame. Seasons turned, yet the practice never faded. In spring, the hollow filled with blossoms, their fragrance sweetening the air as voices rose. In summer, fireflies drifted like sparks among the stones, glowing in rhythm with the singing. In autumn, leaves swirled overhead, their rustling a soft harmony of their own. In winter, the breath of the singers rose as mist, joining in pale clouds above them, as though the valley itself exhaled with them. Now, imagine yourself there. The moon rests high, silver light falling gently across the stones. The air is cool, carrying the faint music of crickets and the distant rush of water. You sit within the circle, surrounded by voices. They rise and fall like waves upon the shore. You feel their sound enter your chest, softening what is heavy within. A note rises in you. Perhaps it is fragile, perhaps it is strong. You let it go, and it joins the harmony, carried with care, for in this valley, no voice is judged. Every sound has a place. Every soul is welcomed back by the song of returning. Rest now in this image. Rest in the circle of harmony. The stones hold the echoes, the air carries the music, and your spirit is light. Mistakes fall away like leaves in the stream. They drift, they vanish, they become part of the song, and what remains is peace, tender and enduring. Now let the sound fade into stillness. Let silence settle like a soft blanket. Let the night cradle you as the stars listen above. The song has ended, yet its echo lingers. It carries you gently into sleep, like a lullaby. Now rest, as the music of the valley returns to silence. Now drift, as the stars lean close. Now sleep, as the song of returning holds you, safe and whole. The desert lies in stillness beneath a wide, open sky. The stars scatter across the darkness, shining like grains of salt upon black stone. The air is cool now, though the day had burned with sun. The sands rest quiet, their golden waves softened by silver light. From far away comes the faint cry of a night bird, a single call echoing, then fading. The world feels hushed, as though it holds its breath. In this desert long ago, tribes lived close to the earth. They carried water in clay jars. They traveled with camels and goats. They slept beneath woven tents, their cloth stretched by poles against the wind. Their lives were shaped by patience, for nothing rushed in the desert. The sun moved slowly, the winds shifted gently. The plants took years to bloom, and so the people learned that time was not an enemy, but a companion. When one among them strayed from kindness or truth, The tribes did not cast them away. They believed error was not an end, but an opening. The path of returning was long, but gentle, and so they gave to the one who had stumbled a loom, a basket of wool, and the task of weaving. Thread by thread, day by day, patience would be their teacher, and the fabric would become their gift. At first, the work seemed endless. The wool was soft but tangled. The loom stood silent, waiting. The desert winds passed through the tent, carrying whispers of sand. The one who sat at the loom would feel the weight of their mistake pressing upon their heart. Yet as the hands began to move, something shifted. One thread laid across another, when a knot tied gently, one line of color stretching. Beneath the fingers, the tribes believed, each thread carried meaning. A pale thread was a breath, dark thread was a thought, a red thread was a memory of fire, a blue thread was a drop of water. As the weaver worked, they were told to breathe slowly, to let the threads gather the weight of their heart. The loom became a mirror. Its rhythm was their rhythm. Its silence was their silence. There was a story of a young man who spoke too quickly, wounding a friend with his words. Shame filled him, and he was brought to the tent of weaving. At first, he was restless. His hands tugged the wool. Roughly, his body ached with impatience, but the loom did not hurry. The threads broke when pulled. The knot slipped when forced. So he slowed. He softened. He listened to the cloth as though it breathed. And soon, his weaving grew steady. Each thread lay smooth, each knot firm. By the time his cloth was finished, many days had passed. His anger had left him, carried away by the threads. When he gave the fabric to the tribe, his friend was there. The cloth was touched, admired, and received as a sign of restored harmony. There was also a tale of an elder woman, whose hands shook with age, who had spoken unkindness to her daughter. She asked to weave, for though none required it, she wished to place her heart in the cloth. For many nights, she worked by lamplight. Her threads were uneven, yet each one was filled with love. When she finished, the cloth shimmered like a desert dawn, pale and glowing. She gave it to her daughter, who wrapped it around her shoulders. In that embrace, the words once spoken were washed away, replaced by warmth. The desert tribes believed the loom taught more than skill. It taught waiting. It taught silence. It taught the rhythm of breath. A thread could not be rushed. A pattern could not be forced. Only by sitting with stillness could the cloth be completed, and so those who had erred learned that patience itself was healing. The mistake became part of the fabric, hidden yet transformed, softened by time and care. Children would often sit near the weavers, watching. They saw how each thread changed the shape of the cloth. They heard the faint creak of the loom, the soft pull of wool. Sometimes they hummed as the weaving went on, their voices gentle as wind. The children learned without words that mistakes could be repaired, that time could mend. That patience was its own kind of song. The desert itself seemed to honor this practice. When the wind moved, it carried long ribbons of sand across the ground like cloth unrolling. When the dawn came, the sky itself looked woven, stripes of gold, rose, and violet braided together. The people said the desert was always weaving, and they were simply following its example. In the evenings, when the weaver rested, they would sit outside the tent and look upon the horizon. The stars shimmered like threads upon a black fabric. The moon seemed to stitch the sky with silver light. The silence of the desert was vast, yet never empty. It was filled with waiting, filled with presence, and in that stillness, the heart became calm. When at last the cloth was finished, the weaver did not keep it. They brought it to the center of the tribe. There, before elders and children, before fire and stars, they laid it down. The cloth was touched by many hands, admired by many eyes. It was not judged by its perfection, but cherished for its patience. Every knot, every thread, every color was a story of healing. The gift belonged not to one, but to all. And so harmony returned, not through punishment, but through patience woven into form. The cloths became treasures of the people. Some were hung inside tents, catching the light of the fire. Some were spread upon the sand for feasts, where bread and dates were shared. Some were given to travelers, so they would carry the peace of the tribe across the desert. Each cloth lived on, carrying the memory of the hands that made it. And those who wove were remembered not for their errors, but for their patience, their willingness to mend. Now imagine yourself in that desert night. The tent is quiet, the loom before you. The lamp glows softly, a small sun of warmth. Your hands move, thread by thread. Each pull is a breath, each knot is a release. The sound of weaving is steady, like a gentle drumbeat. Outside, the wind moves the sand, whispering like distant waves. The stars keep watch, endless and patient. And within you, peace begins to grow. The fabric takes shape, not rushed, not forced. Only steady, gentle. True, it carries your thoughts, your weight, your longing. Yet as you weave, you feel lighter. The cloth receives what you give and transforms it. It does not hold your burden against you. It makes it into beauty. Now the weaving slows. The threads are finished. The loom grows silent. The cloth rests in your hands, warm from your touch. It is ready to be shared. You step into the night, into the quiet desert, into the circle of your people. The stars glow above. The fire flickers before you. You lay the cloth down, and it becomes part of the tribe's story, part of the earth's patience, part of the sky's song. Rest in this image. Rest in the desert silence. Yes, where mistakes are woven into harmony. Rest in the patience of thread and breath, of sand and stars. The loom is quiet now. The cloth is complete. Your spirit is light. Let us drift onward, gently. Let the desert cradle you as night deepens. Let the stars return to guide your dreams. Now rest, as the weaving of patience holds you. Now sleep, as the earth itself softens around you. The night opens softly. The desert sky is wide, painted in deep blue, with 1,000 stars resting upon it like quiet lanterns of heaven. A crescent moon leans low, casting a pale silver light across the sand. The wind is calm, carrying only the faintest sigh of the earth. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a small bell chimes, carried by the stillness. Delicate as a drop of water falling into a still pool, it is here that the ancient path begins. A road not carved by stone, but by footsteps and memory. A road lined with quiet lanterns, each one glowing faintly, its flame fed by a bowl of fragrant oil. And beside each lantern, smoke rises in thin, curling threads, weaving skyward with a grace that belongs to no hand, only to the air. This is the path of lantern smoke, the path where seekers once walked, carrying the weight of their hearts, their regrets, their unspoken burdens. They came with offerings, not of wealth, not of pride, but of incense. Bundles of herbs, sticks of resin, leaves dried by sun and prayer. They placed them into flames, and the smoke lifted their worries away, drifting into the vast heavens. The story is told of a traveler, a quiet soul who carried sorrow like a heavy cloak. Each step through the desert sand seemed longer than the one before. The traveler's voice had once been harsh, words spoken in anger that left cracks in the hearts of those nearby. Yet now, in the hush of twilight, the traveler sought a place where those words could be healed, where the sharpness of the past could soften, dissolve, and fade. He came to the beginning of the lantern road. There, an elder stood wrapped in robes the color of dusk. Her face was kind, marked by time, yet her eyes were soft as still water. She held a clay bowl filled with small sticks of incense, and as the traveler bowed before her, she spoke in a voice no louder than the breeze. Each flame you pass is a teacher. Each trail of smoke carries a prayer. What burdens you carry may rise upward if your heart is steady enough to let them go. The traveler took the incense and pressed it to his forehead. The scent was sweet and grounding, a fragrance that seemed to stir memories of quiet gardens and morning rain. He lit the incense and held it gently in both hands. The path stretched onward, lined with lanterns that shimmered like stars drawn down to earth. Each lantern flame was small, yet its smoke rose high and far, twisting into shapes the mind could almost read. Some saw doves in the smoke, wings stretched in blessing. Others saw rivers flowing beyond the eye's reach. To the traveler, the smoke felt like breath itself, fragile, fleeting, yet filled with meaning. With each step, the incense stick grew smaller. With each step, the traveler's chest felt lighter. He walked slowly, as though the very earth beneath him urged him into a rhythm of patience. His feet pressed gently into the sand. His eyes watched the smoke drift away, curling like a ribbon, free to rise and free to vanish. At the first lantern, he thought of his anger. He whispered, not aloud, but in silence, "May this sharpness leave me." The smoke caught the unspoken words and carried them upward. The flame of the lantern swayed as if in answer, and the traveler moved onward. At the second lantern, he thought of the harm his words had caused. Faces came to his mind, faces of those who had turned away from him. His chest ached, yet he breathed, and with the breath came release. May their hearts be healed. Again the smoke rose, curling into the vastness, and the traveler felt a gentle stillness in his chest. The path grew longer, the night deeper. Above, the stars turned in silence, their slow dance unnoticed by most, but felt by the soul. The traveler walked in rhythm with the night sky, each step a heartbeat, each breath a thread between earth and heaven. The incense stick grew shorter in his hands, the smoke thinner yet no less true. At the fifth lantern, he thought of himself. For so long, he had carried shame like a wound, refusing to forgive his own spirit. He looked into the lantern flame, and in it he saw a reflection, not of his body, but of his soul, weary yet waiting, and he whispered, "May I learn patience with myself." The lantern flame flickered softly, casting a golden glow across the traveler's face. The smoke from his incense twined with the lantern smoke, two streams becoming one, then drifting into the sky together. In that moment he felt a loosening, as though knots tied within his heart were slowly untangling. The ancients believed that the heavens read smoke like words. Each twist and curl was a letter, each breath of wind a phrase. To them, smoke was the bridge between mortal and divine, carrying what could not be spoken aloud. A prayer too heavy for words was given to flame and air, and the unseen spirits would listen. The traveler, though weary, felt this truth. His silence was no longer emptiness, it was full, alive with meaning. He no longer needed to speak to be heard. Each step upon the sand, each thread of smoke, each silent breath was a language of its own, and so he walked. Lantern after lantern, smoke after smoke, burden after burden, lifted and gone. At the final lantern, the incense in his hands had burned down to a glowing ember. The last thread of smoke rose gently, wavering as though reluctant to leave. The traveler stood still, watching. The ember faded, but the smoke lingered, lifting into the night until it was lost among the stars. The elder appeared again, as if stepping from the shadows of the path. Her hands were folded, her eyes calm. She spoke, her voice soft as the hush of desert sand. "The smoke has carried what you could not. The sky has received it. Now your steps may be lighter." The traveler bowed deeply, his heart both empty and full. The weight he had carried was no longer his. It had joined the endless air, dissolved into the mystery above. He turned, and the desert wind touched his face like a gentle hand. For the first time in many nights, he felt at peace. And so the story of the path of lantern smoke lives on, a story of letting go, a story of burdens lifted not by force, but by gentleness. When one feels heavy, they need not run, nor hide, nor fight. They may light a small flame. They may watch the smoke rise, curling upward with grace. And in watching, they may learn the rhythm of release. For every burden is lighter when it is shared with the sky. Every regret grows softer when it drifts into the arms of the stars. And every heart, no matter how tired, may find peace when patience is allowed to bloom. Now the lanterns grow dim. The desert night deepens. The smoke fades into the vast dark sky, leaving only stillness, only silence, only the quiet breath of the earth itself. Rest now. Gentle soul, let the smoke carry what lingers within you. Let the stars above receive it, and let the night cradle you in its endless calm. Drift onward as the lantern flames fade and the heavens remain. The evening drifts into stillness. The sun has lowered behind the far hills, leaving the sky awash with a faint glow of amber and violet. The air is cool, carrying with it the soft scent of earth and stone. Shadows stretch long across the land, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird calls, slow and unhurried. as though reminding the world that silence has its own kind of music. Beyond the plains lies a cave. Its mouth opens wide like the quiet entrance of a temple, dark but not frightening. The rocks around it glimmer faintly with moisture, touched by the hidden breath of underground springs. From within the cave comes a sound, gentle, hollow, like the world exhaling. It is the sound of echoes, resting and waiting, ready to receive what the heart brings. It was said, in the time of old tribes, that those who had erred would seek this cave. They would carry their misdeeds not on their backs, not in their hands, but in their voices. For the cave was a listener, patient and steady, and it returned every word, softened, smoothed, and reshaped. In hearing their own voice given back to them, the wrongdoers would begin to understand, to feel, to release. A story remains of one such wanderer. A youth, known for reckless words and thoughtless acts, wandered through the fields under the deepening twilight. Their heart was heavy, though their steps were light upon the grass. They had spoken unkindness to one they loved, and the wound of it lingered. Unable to bear the silence of their guilt, they followed the old path, marked by stones and wind, to the mouth of the Cave of Echoes. The entrance was cool, touched by shadows. The youth paused, pressing a hand to the stone, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath its skin. Inside, the darkness was not harsh, but gentle, like a cloak of rest. The cave welcomed, not with words, but with silence. The youth stepped inside, their footsteps soft upon the damp ground. With each step, the world outside grew quieter. The song of crickets faded, the rustle of leaves stilled. Only the sound of breath and the faint drip of water remained. And then a whisper, not from another, but from the walls themselves. The echo of footsteps returning, faint, delayed, and kind. The cave opened wider within, its ceiling stretching high, invisible in the dark. The youth lit a small lantern, its flame trembling. The light revealed shimmering stone, ridges shaped by time, and pools of still water that mirrored the glow. Each sound, the crackle of flame, the shifting of cloth, the gentle breath, was received by the cave and given back in softened tones. The youth knelt near one of the pools. The surface was calm, reflecting the tiny lantern flame like a star caught in water. With a trembling voice, they spoke their confession. "I have caused hurt. My words were sharp. I did not see the pain I left behind." The cave listened. Then, gently, it returned the words. But the echo was not harsh. The cave's voice was lower, rounder, softer. It turned sharpness into calm. It returned, "Hey, left behind, behind," as though reminding the youth that pain may rest in the past, not forever in the present. The youth's eyes closed, tears welling. They spoke again, louder this time. "I wish to make it right. I wish to heal what I have broken." The cave breathed back. "Heal, heal, heal." The sound lingered, floating upon the damp air like a chant. The youth placed a hand upon their chest, and in hearing their own longing return to them, they felt the truth of their desire grow stronger. It was said that the cave was a mirror, not of the face, but of the soul. Words spoken within it did not vanish. They were reshaped, returned like waves upon water. Many had entered it with anger and left with peace. Many had spoken their darkest griefs and found them echoed back like gentle lullabies, no longer cutting, no longer sharp, only softened, only human. The youth remained in the cave for many breaths. Each confession came forth slowly, like threads unwinding. "I was careless," echo now and careless. Less. "I wish to change," echo. "Oh, change. The echoes were not judgments. They were not condemnations. They were reminders. Reminders that words carry weight, yet also lightness. Reminders that every voice can soften when it learns to listen. As time drifted on, the lantern flame dimmed. The youth placed it upon the stone floor and lay back, staring upward into the unseen ceiling. They spoke now not with trembling but with calm. "I forgive myself. I will return with patience. I will walk with gentleness." The cave returned these words, carrying them like feathers upon air. Gentleness, 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 and with that, the youth felt their chest grow lighter. Not empty, but clear like the still pool beside them. For the cave had taken what was heavy and returned it in a form the heart could hold. When dawn touched the horizon, the youth left the cave. The light of the morning sun greeted them, soft gold upon the fields. The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of grass and faraway rain. Though the world was unchanged, the youth was different. Their heart was steadier, their voice calmer. They had learned not only to speak, but to listen. Listen not only to others, but to their own heart, softened through the echoes of stone, and so the teaching of the Cave of Echoes lived on. Those who carried burdens of guilt or regret would find their way to its depths. They would speak, and in hearing themselves returned, they would understand. For sometimes the path to healing is not silence alone, but the sound of one's own voice reshaped into gentleness. Now let the cave grow quiet once more. Its walls rest, its pools reflect, its echoes sleep. The night outside is calm, the stars waiting above. Rest, gentle listener. Let your thoughts soften, as words softened in the cave. Let each echo within you become gentler, kinder, lighter. The night will carry them, the stars will receive them, and you will drift onward, into rest, into stillness, into peace. Now rest as the echoes fade, and the silence remains. The desert sleeps beneath a sky of endless stars. The air is cool, touched by night's quiet breath, though the earth still carries the warmth of the day. The dunes stretch outward, soft and unbroken, rising and falling like the curves of a sleeping ocean. Somewhere in the distance, a faint wind moves across the sand, shaping it into ripples, each ridge shining faintly under the watchful gaze of the moon. In this stillness, the desert keeps its secrets, and among those secrets is the practice of the mystics, who once lived in tents at the edge of the dunes. They were seekers of silence, listeners to the earth, watchers of the stars. To them, the desert was not empty but alive. Every grain of sand was a fragment of eternity. Every breeze carried a lesson. Every shadow was a companion of patience. When one of the tribes erred, when harsh words were spoken or careless acts left harm in their wake, they would not be punished with anger. Instead, they would be brought to sit before a vessel filled with sand. The vessel was simple, clay shaped by hand, curved and plain, holding within it the desert itself. The penitent would sit cross-legged in the quiet tent. Before them, the vessel rested. At their side, a small cup or spoon of bone, smooth from years of use. And their task was to lift the sand, grain by grain, and let it fall into a second empty vessel. There was no rush, no clock, no measure but the rhythm of their own breath. Each grain, one by one, became a moment of reflection. Each sound of falling sand was a note in the desert's music. The act was simple yet endless, and in that endlessness, the heart was softened. A story is told of one seeker, a young man whose impatience had wounded his kin. He was asked to sit before the sand. He resisted at first, for his spirit was restless, and the task seemed too small, too slow. But he obeyed, for such was the way of the tribe. The tent was silent, lit only by the glow of an oil lamp. Shadows danced gently upon the woven walls. The young man lifted a pinch of sand, let it fall, and sighed. Again he lifted, and again it fell. At first his mind churned with resistance. His thoughts leapt like restless horses, eager to run from the stillness. But the desert has patience greater than any heart. The sand did not rush, the lamp did not hurry. And slowly, as the grains fell, his breath began to slow. He began to listen. The faint hiss of sand slipping into the empty vessel was like a whisper of wind. Each sound was delicate, vanishing as soon as it came, yet leaving behind a sense of rhythm, a pulse. It was as though time itself was speaking, not in hours or days, but in tiny fragments, smaller than the eye could see. As the hours stretched on, the young man's anger lessened. The memory of his harsh words felt softer, as though the sand itself had absorbed their sharpness. He began to see how quickly moments pass, how every word, once spoken, falls like sand, impossible to gather back, yet part of the desert of one's life. The elders said that the sand was sacred because it taught patience. Each grain was a reminder of how the world is built, not in leaps, but in small steps. The mountain is stone upon stone. The river is drop upon drop. The desert is grain upon grain. So too is the heart shaped by the moments it carries. And in moving the sand slowly, a person learned to move their thoughts more gently, to treat their mistakes not as walls but as paths. Outside the tent, the night deepened. Stars gathered in rivers of light across the sky. The desert was silent, save for the shifting of dunes and the far cry of a night bird. Inside, the young man continued his task. His hands no longer trembled with impatience. Each movement became steady, like a slow tide. He whispered to the sand as he worked, "May I be forgiven." The sand answered with its soft fall, "I will be more patient." Again, the grains slid downward, carrying his vow. With every handful, his heart grew lighter, for he saw that time, like the sand, could never be held tightly. It could only be honored, grain by grain, moment by moment. When the vessel was finally emptied, dawn had touched the sky. The first light of the sun spread gold over the horizon, painting the dunes with fire and shadow. The young man looked at the two vessels, one now empty, the other full, and understood. His burden had been transformed. What was once scattered within him had been gathered. What was once restless had been calmed. He bowed to the sand, for it had been his teacher. The tribe received him back not with judgment but with quiet nods, for they too had known the lesson of the sand. In his hands he carried the patience of the desert, a gift not only for himself but for those he had hurt. The mystics taught that all who walked the earth carried their own vessels of sand. Some grains were joys, some were sorrows, some were mistakes, and some were forgiveness. To live was to learn the rhythm of letting them fall one by one until all was complete. The desert reminded them that time is vast, and yet every grain matters. Each moment is small, but together they build the dune, the day, the life. And though one cannot hold back the flow, one can choose to move with it in gentleness, in care, in patience. Now the dunes rest under the night once more. The wind whispers across their slopes, carrying the voices of ages. The stars are steady above, eternal grains of light in the sky. Rest now, gentle listener. Feel the rhythm of your breath, slow and calm, like sand falling into silence. Let your thoughts drift as grains upon the wind. Each worry, each weight can slip away, grain by grain, moment by moment. The desert holds you. Time itself holds you. Let us drift onward as the night deepens. Let the sand of time teach patience in your dreams. Now rest as the stars return and the world grows quiet. The night is still. The stars drift like pale lamps in the wide sky, and the earth below rests in its hush. Far away, in a land where rivers kiss the soil and golden fields swayed under the sun, a quiet ritual once unfolded. It was a ritual of bread. Not bread for feasting, not bread for hunger, but bread for the heart. Villages gathered around ovens made of clay. The air smelled of wheat, warm and sweet, a fragrance that seemed to rise beyond the rooftops, as if the smoke of prayer had found its way into the breath of heaven. Here, those who carried sorrow in their chest, or guilt heavy upon their shoulders, would come with bare hands and bowed heads. They brought grain that had been ground with care. They brought water from the stream, clear and cool as forgiveness itself. And they brought their silence, for silence was the first step of the offering. In that silence, they would kneel by the hearth where the embers glowed like tiny suns. Their hearts whispered secrets, not to a priest, not to a crowd, but to the dough beneath their palms. Every fold of the bread carried a story, every press of the hand carried a confession, a harsh word spoken too. Quickly, a kindness left undone, a promise. Broken in the dust of days, the bread became a vessel, soft yet strong, holding all that was once bitter. As the dough rose, so too did hope. There was a teaching among the old ones. They said, "The earth turns grief into seed, the fire turns seed into bread, and bread, when shared, turns sorrow into strength." So the people baked. Some shaped their loaves in circles, to remind them of the wheel of time. Some pressed lines into the surface, symbols of rivers flowing endlessly, and some kept the bread plain, believing the simplest gift was the most true. When the bread was ready, it was lifted into the oven where fire licked the stone, and warmth cradled each loaf. The waiting was long, but the waiting was part of the prayer, for time itself became a teacher. One learned patience as the bread slowly browned. One learned trust as the air filled with sweetness, and one learned surrender as the crackle of fire softened the edges of regret. When at last the bread was pulled from the flame, golden and glowing, The people carried it to the gathering place. It was never eaten alone. It was always shared. Imagine the scene, a long wooden table, set beneath branches that swayed gently in the night wind. Lanterns flickered, casting circles of quiet light upon the earth. The loaves were broken by hand, pieces passed from palm to palm. A mother gave to her child, a friend gave to a neighbor. A stranger gave to one who had wronged them. And in this simple act, forgiveness became more than a word. It became taste. It became nourishment. It became warmth in the belly, a reminder that sorrow, too, can feed the soul when transformed. Among these people, bread was never only food, it was prayer made visible. It was memory made soft. It was sorrow made gentle. Each grain had once grown in the sun. Each drop of water had once fallen as rain. Each hand that kneaded had once trembled with guilt, and then steadied with hope. All of this came together in loaves that told stories without words. And as those stories were eaten, the village was healed. For in giving, one found release. In receiving, one found grace. The bread carried it all, the weight, the release, the renewal. In time, the ritual grew into legend. They said the earth itself could taste the offering, that the roots of the trees felt lighter, that the stones hummed softly, and that the sky grew brighter with every loaf shared. Even travelers passing through the village, who knew nothing of its customs, would sit at the table. They would eat, and without knowing why, they would feel at peace, for peace has no language but presence. And bread, when broken, is a language older than any tongue. Picture now a single traveler. She has walked far, carrying sadness in her chest that no words could ease. Her feet are sore, her clothes dusted with the long road. She arrives at the village on the night of the offering. The people smile softly and place bread into her hands. She breaks it, and for the first time in many months, she does not feel alone. The bread is warm, and as she eats, she feels her sorrow soften. What she carried has not vanished, but it no longer presses so sharply. It rests like grain within the earth, waiting for its season to rise again as something new. In this way, the ritual taught a simple truth. No pain is wasted. No mistake is without lesson. No sorrow is without seed. Bread was the reminder that the things one bakes with fire can become nourishment, that the things one shares with love can become healing. And so year after year, the ovens glowed, the tables filled, the bread was broken, and with each loaf, a village found its peace again. Now let the image rest in your heart. A long table in the quiet of evening. The night air cool, yet the bread still warm. Hands passing gifts, eyes meeting softly. A hush of forgiveness woven through the air. You may feel yourself there, sitting among them. The bread rests in your palms. It is light, yet it holds so much. You take a piece, you taste it slowly, and you know without words that you are forgiven, that you belong, that you are home. The embers fade. The night grows deeper and the stars lean low. The story closes, yet its warmth lingers, like bread still resting in the heart. Now let us drift onward, softly, gently, into the quiet beyond. The bread has been offered, the sorrow has been lifted. The night will hold you, the stars will keep watch. And you may rest, as the earth once rested after the harvest, content and whole. Now rest as the stars return. Now rest, as the bread becomes dream. The night has deepened. The air is cool, still, and calm. The earth lies quiet, and above it stretches the endless sky, soft and eternal, like a blanket woven of starlight. Here begins the final step of a journey of sorrow turned to forgiveness, and forgiveness turned to peace. It is the sky of release. A figure rests upon the ground, the soil beneath steady, the heavens above vast. The penitent, once bowed with weight, now lies beneath the open sky. No roof, no walls, no boundary, only the breath of night and the shimmer of constellations that drift like ancient guardians through the silent dark. The heart that once trembled has spoken its truth in sacred caves. It has counted the sands of time, watched sorrow turn to wisdom, and shared bread baked from regret. Now, all has led here, to this quiet bed of earth, where the soul may rest at last under the gaze of eternity. The sky does not judge. The stars do not ask. They simply shine. Each star a witness. Each light a reminder that release is not taken. It is given, like breath exhaled, like water poured, like a bird set free into flight. The penitent gazes upward, and slowly the chest loosens. Tears, if they come, fall softly, absorbed by the soil that has cradled countless sorrows before. The body feels small beneath such vastness, yet not alone. Never alone. The ancients told a story. They said the sky was a great bowl, turned upside down, its inner surface lit with lamps of fire. Every lamp was the soul of one who had learned release. Every flame was the memory of peace discovered. And when one finally laid down their burdens, their spark too would rise to join the sky of release. It was not a loss. It was not an ending. It was a return, a coming home to a space that had always been waiting. The penitent watches. The constellations seem to shift, not with haste, but with slow, eternal rhythm. A hunter, a river, a wheel of light, symbols written across the dark, guiding the soul with their quiet script. The chest rises and falls. Breath becomes slow, breath becomes steady. In every breath out, a burden leaves. In every breath in, a softness enters. Release is not forced. It arrives gently like dawn over the horizon, like a tide that recedes, leaving sand smooth and glistening, like wind that carries away smoke until the air is clear again. The earth listens, the sky receives, and the heart, once heavy, begins to float. Some say the stars carry sorrow upward, where it dissolves into light. Others say the heavens echo back blessings for every burden laid down. But here, beneath the night, such words do not matter. What matters is the quiet. What matters is the peace. Long ago, desert mystics lay upon the sands, staring upward until their thoughts melted into the wide expanse. They called this practice the Great Release. They believed that when one gazed into the sky, the self dissolved, and the soul returned to its place among the stars. In their songs they said, "We are the dust of earth, we are the breath of sky." And when we release, we return to both. The penitent, lying still, feels the truth of these words. The soil beneath is steady, the sky above is infinite. The heart between them beats softly, no longer with urgency, but with surrender. A cool wind drifts across the land. It touches the skin, it brushes the hair, and it carries with it the hush of night. The wind feels like the whisper of release, gentle, invisible, yet deeply real. The stars blink slowly as if nodding in approval. The moon lingers, silent and watchful, its pale face calm and kind. Release does not erase. It transforms. A stone once carried becomes part of the path. A tear once shed becomes part of the river. A sorrow once confessed becomes part of the bread that nourishes others. Now at last the penitent no longer carries. The earth carries. The sky carries. The stars carry. And the heart is free. Hours pass unnoticed. The night deepens. Sleep comes, not as escape, but as embrace. The penitent drifts into dreams under a roof of starlight. The dreams are gentle. The dreams are kind. And in those dreams, every burden becomes a feather, lifted upward into the endless sky. The story tells us this: forgiveness is complete when the heart is lighter than the sky. And tonight, beneath these stars, forgiveness has found its home. The heavens will remember, the earth will hold, and the soul will rest. Now let us close our eyes as the penitent closed theirs. Feel the breath slow. Feel the weight soften. Feel the stars above, steady and eternal, watching, blessing, receiving. The sky of release stretches on forever. You are safe beneath it. You are held within it. And now you may rest as the stars return and the night carries you into its gentle silence.